All right, welcome to the Chapter 7 demo discussion. We're going to be talking about modeling walls today. So part of what we're going to be doing with walls is we're going to be laying down walls. We're going to be placing walls over the top of a CAD file, which, by the way, you need to download ahead of this lesson. So if you haven't already done that, go ahead and go out to the assignment, click on the CAD file. It's called house.dwg. Download that to a location that you'll be able to find it, because we're going to link that into a Revit project, and we're going to use that sort of as the background that we're going to trace over to create this house. We're also going to dig into the type properties of the walls. We're going to be looking at how to create a new wall and build a wall entirely from scratch, layer by layer, based on the assembly that we would normally have in a residential construction. So let's get to it. We're going to start a new project. And so we're going to go to File, New, and if you are not in Revit here, you should be able to see that on the opening screen. But we're going to go to Project, and then make sure that you use the default residential template. So that would be this one right here, residential default. I've already done that, so I'm not going to click on it. But you should see a layout similar to what you are seeing over here in the project browser. We're going to start out by just digging into the structure of an existing wall. So easiest way to do this is to just go ahead and click on the wall tool. And then let's pick a wall that has some interesting layers. So let's go maybe down to this interior 6.5 partition, and then click on Edit Type right here. So once you click on that, it'll open this Type Properties window, but we have to click on the structure. So Edit next to Structure, and then that's going to open this window, which tells us all of the individual layers. So let's take a look at this. You can see that on the top side of this layer list here, we have the exterior side, and then down at the bottom we have the interior side. So we know that this wall assembly is going to be built from the inside at the bottom up to the outside at the top. And we do put these things in order as they would be placed in that actual wall assembly. Now with an interior wall, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to call it interior and exterior, because you don't really have that on an interior wall. Both sides are essentially interior, but this is the way that Revit sets it up, and it does become a lot more useful, those two sides, when you're dealing with exterior walls. So we'll look at that next. You can see that on this particular wall type, we only have 3 layers within that wall system, that wall assembly. We have a gypsum board on the inside and the outside. That's a 1/2 inch gypsum board. And then the inside the core boundary, we have our structure layer, and in this case it's metal studs. So primarily 3 things we have to set when we create a wall type, and that is the function category, the material category, and then the thickness of each of the individual layers. Layer 2 and 4 are essentially just the core boundary layer. That's not actually any kind of physical thing within the wall, but it is defining where the boundary of that, basically that structure, is going to be. So we would typically put the core boundary layer around the stud layer, on both sides of the stud layer. Sometimes additional things will happen inside that core boundary, but for the most part, you're just going to have one layer in there, and what it is basically going to be the space that's taken up by the framing of that wall. Sometimes it's easier to visualize what's actually happening here if we look at a picture of it. So let's go ahead and open up this preview window, and then let's go ahead and change the orientation to section. And so we can see basically a section view of that wall. Right now, the inside finished layer, the exterior finished layer is selected. But we could select each of these individual layers, and you can see them highlight within this wall. So if you're not quite sure what's going on within the wall, if it's too hard to look at this over here, remember that you do have that preview window over here. So we're not going to make any changes to this wall. We're going to cancel out of that. Cancel out of this as well. Let's go ahead and pick a different wall. We'll go with something a little bit more complicated. And let's take a look at one of these exterior wall types. We'll go ahead and look at this exterior wood siding on wood stud layer. So our type, and we're going to click on the Edit Type button, get into the type properties, and then again we're going to click on Edit next to the structure. So here we are, you can see that this wall is a little bit more complicated, has a lot more stuff going on. We have gypsum board on the far inside. Right under that we have the vapor barrier. Within the core boundary, again, the framing of the wall, the softwood lumber layer. And then outside on the exterior side of that core boundary, we have the sheathing. And then we have an air infiltration barrier. We call that house wrap sometimes. And then finally, this wall is finished off on the outside with siding. But again, each one of these layers has a function, a material assigned to it, and then a thickness assigned to it. Notice that not all of these layers within the wall assembly have an actual thickness. For example, the membranes, whenever you see the membrane layer, typically that's going to be a thickness of 0. Now it's not really 0, but for all intents and purposes it is, because it doesn't really take up a significant amount of space within that wall. Same thing with the inside layer. We have a vapor retarder. That's basically just going to be polyethylene plastic. Very, very thin stuff. So again, it doesn't really create any thickness. So the membrane layer function type will be assigned with a 0 thickness. Everything else is going to require a positive thickness. So let's go ahead and cancel out of that. And we'll cancel out of that too. Finally, we're going to take a look at the generic walls. And what I want you to do is just use this generic 4-inch as a starting point. We're going to create a new wall type. So we're going to click on that basic wall generic 4-inch, click on edit type. And anytime we're going to create a new thing, it's always a good idea to start with an existing thing that is fairly close to, so you don't have to make very many changes. But we'll start off with something that's similar to what we're trying to make, but we know that we're going to have to make a few changes to it. First step here is going to be duplicate, and then we're going to give it a name. Remember that the list of system families that you're going to encounter in this type selector window is always alphabetized. So it's important to think through the naming convention of the different wall types that you're going to be creating. Generally, it's good to start with your naming system, starting with a very general description, moving towards more specific. And what that does is it just keeps your wall types categorized, grouped together by type. Let's go ahead and name this one Interior 2x4. Something just like this. Now we could put additional description in there, but for the sake of time, we're just going to leave it simple for this one. We'll click OK. Now we've created a copy of that generic wall, but it is still generic. We named it something, but now we have to go through and set it up to where it actually is that thing. So we're going to click on Edit, and you can see that the structure of this wall is nothing's really defined except for the function. So we have a thickness of 4 inches, which we may know already that that's not going to work, because if it's a 2x4, it's actually only 3.5 inches. So we're going to build this thing 3.5 inches thick. And then what we're going to do is set the material type to a softwood lumber or something similar. So let's see what's available. We clicked on this builder button here to the right. And in the material browser, what we're going to do is just type in a name. So I'm just going to type in softwood. And that'll basically just search the entire library for a bunch of different possibilities. We have a couple in here that could work. I'm going to go ahead and just pick on this one, softwood lumber, and then I'm going to say OK. You can see it listed there now. So we have a couple more layers we have to add. We're going to go ahead and click on Insert. You can see it placed it right here. That's not what we want. So we're going to move that up outside the core boundary. And then let's go ahead and insert one more. And we're going to move that one down to the other side of the core boundary. We do have to change the function. So we're going to make this both finish layers. Same type, because it's going to be the same material. And then we're going to go ahead and set the material to gypsum board. So we'll go ahead and just type GYP, see what comes up. Gypsum wall board, that should work. Say OK. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing here. All right, now we just have to set the thickness. Let's go ahead and set that to 0.5 inches for each. And I think we're all set now. We have an interior wall that is based on a 2x4 framing lumber. and 1/2 inch gypsum board on each side. Say OK and OK. There, you've created your first wall type. So obviously it's important to understand construction, the construction type that you're going to be working with and designing for in order to build the walls the way that they're supposed to be. It's really important that we model the project according to its real world size and real world materials. But with just those skills we learned just now, you can really model any type of wall. You can put any number of layers within that wall assembly, give them the thickness that would be appropriate, and you can create an exact copy of what it's supposed to be so that when you model it up in the computer, it matches what's going to be built in the real world. If you haven't already, let's go ahead and save this Revit file now. We are going to be doing this in 2 parts. There'll be a part 1 and a part 2 for this. And so we want to be sure to use this same project that we start today for part 2 as well. So give it a name. We're just going to call it Chapter 7 Demo. And make sure you put it in a location that you'll be able to find it easily. All right, so next we're going to repeat something we did earlier on in the semester, and that is to import a CAD file into Revit. And basically what we're doing with this is we're just bringing in the lines that would represent the sort of the floor plan of the house. And then we're going to use that to sort of trace so that we can create a 3-dimensional model over the top of it. So that house.dwg file that is attached to the assignment that I had you download, we're going to go ahead and import that next. Normally, if we were going to bring in a CAD file that was part of a live project, we would link the CAD file. In this case, we are just going to import it, and it's going to be a one-off copy of that CAD file. All right, so here we are at house.dwg. Yours, you'll have to probably browse for a little bit. We're going to leave all of this stuff at the default position. The colors, we'll go ahead and let those be preserved. We'll let Revit do its magic of auto-detecting the import units so it comes in at the right size. And then over here, we want the positioning to be auto, origin to internal origin. So with it selected, we'll go ahead and click open. And it should bring that CAD file in and place it on level 1. So you will notice that this house that we're looking at here has a number of different views sort of included in this CAD file. So it didn't really put this floor plan exactly where I wanted it to go. I think placing it within the boundary of these 4 elevation views would be a better location. So I am going to move this over and try to center the floor plan in this space right here. So I'm going to select it, and I'm just going to click and drag this over. If I can, nope, I need to unpin it first. So right here, you'll unpin this for a minute, and then we'll just kind of drag this over and place it kind of right in the middle here, like so. So with that CAD file in the right place now, let's go ahead and start modeling over the top of this thing. So one thing I like to do before I start modeling, even if I have a CAD file to trace, I like to set up reference planes. Reference planes are going to act as the skeleton or the sort of the structure of your model. And they're really important because you can pin them in place and then you can lock and align your model to those reference planes. And so no matter where you are vertically within your model, you can know that you're always lined up in the right spot. You'll always see those reference planes at any level, whether you're down in the foundation or up at the roof, you'll see those reference planes passing through. So let's go ahead and create those reference planes first. So with a rectangular house, you really can set up just 4 reference planes, and those would align with the outside face of the perimeter. However, since the structure between the garage and the house sort of occurs along this line here, we're going to put 1 more reference plane down through there. So we'll go to the Architecture tab, Reference Plane tool right here, and then make sure that your reference planes come down and they hang out past the edge of your house like so. Now you can't really do that on both ends. from the outset, but you can grab the grips and pull those up after you've created it. Let's go ahead and do that on all four sides, and then we'll do the right side of this dividing wall between the garage and the house as well. And we'll clean this up, pull this out so it aligns with the other ones. Okay, we've got our reference plane set up now. Let's go ahead and select all of them and let's pin them in place. All right, so what I want to do is I could go through and control select one at a time, but I'm going to practice using that filter tool. And so I'm going to select everything, and then I'm going to filter out to where I'm just selecting reference planes. And actually I didn't have to, because my house is, it's a CAD file, so it didn't select it at all anyways. So now I've got all 5 of those reference planes selected. Let's go ahead and pin them in place using this tool right here. And you can see now they are just kind of locked in position. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the walls, the actual walls over the top of this thing. But before we do that, it's always a good idea to double check what you have for levels first. So I'm going to go to the south elevation view just to kind of see what my levels, how my levels are set up right now. And you can see that I do have a first floor level at 0. I have a foundation floor at -1.3 feet. It's a little bit strange. I'm not sure why that is there, but we can always change this stuff, right? We have a second floor, which we're not actually going to have in this project, but we are going to have a basement. Okay, so let's go ahead and clean up these layers, these levels first. Let's take the second floor out. I'm going to select it, and then I'm just going to click delete. And it says, along with the selection, 8 elements and 4 views will be deleted, and that's fine. Second floor we don't need, so I'm just going to get rid of all of that. The roof is a little bit high now, so I'm going to change the height of the roof from 18 feet to 8 feet. So that essentially means that my first floor up to my bottom of my roof, or the bearing of my roof, the height of my wall is going to be 8 feet tall. For this one, for this foundation, I believe what that's talking about is the top of the foundation. So let's go ahead and rename that, and we're also going to change its height a little bit. So if I slow double click on that, it should go into edit mode. It's not for some reason. There it goes. And so I'm going to put capital T period, capital O period, foundation. And we'll go ahead and let it rename the corresponding views, even though we don't really need a view for that. All right, so we have top of foundation. And let's go ahead and change the height of this thing. Instead of -1.3 feet, let's say -1.1 feet, 1.5. Which is a little bit hard to type, but 1/1/2. Enter. All right. Okay, we're getting closer. Let's go down here. We're going to go ahead and change some of this stuff as well. The basement level is going to be where the top of our floor in the basement is going to be set. We'll leave that alone for now. The top of the footing is going to be basically the bottom of the foundation wall. So let's set that to -9 feet 1.5 so that that foundation wall ends up exactly 8 feet tall. 1/1/2. Okay. And then the bottom of footing, we really don't need that layer or that level in there. So we're going to delete that out. We will delete the views along with it. So we'll say okay there. Now, we want to make sure that the thickness of our floor is 4 inches, so it aligns with what we would normally see in residential construction. 4-inch thick concrete floors in the basement is what we would normally see. So if we take -8.6 feet and we add 4 more inches to that, it would be basically -8.10 feet, right? So we're going to go ahead and change the top of the footing to that. -8 10. There we go. And I think we're all set now. We're ready to start modeling. So let's go back to our first floor plan. And now we can start laying in some walls. So we're going to pick the wall tool. Before we get too much farther, before we start actually putting any walls in there, let's set the temporary dimension setting. This is something that we've emphasized previously. This is really important to do. Temporary dimensions should be based on the face of the wall core, which is what we would normally dimension to. So we're trying to figure out how far two walls are apart from each other. It should always be defaulting to the core, the face of the core of the wall. So let's make sure that that is the case. We'll go to the Manage tab. We're going to go to Additional Settings, Annotations, and then Temporary Dimensions. It's having a little trouble accessing this. There we go. And we'll just change that to faces of core. We'll leave the doors and windows at center lines. Say OK. All right, back to the Architecture tab. Let's get to the Wall tool. And let's pick an exterior wall that would be appropriate for the exterior of a residential structure. This one right here, exterior wood siding on wood stud, is the one we want. And the location line, we want that to be set to the exterior core face. All right, so core face exterior for the location line. Let's make sure that the base of the wall is set to first floor and that the top constraint, we're going to set that to roof. I think everything else is going to be just fine. Let's go ahead and click our first point right here at the corner. You can see as I move my cursor away, it looks like it is putting it in the right location, right? But if it was flipped for some reason, if we were trying to go down this way and it's going the wrong way, just remember we can tap the space bar and then it'll flip it over into the right orientation. Okay, but this way we wanted it the other way, so we'll tap the space bar again and then we'll just run it on down to the other corner. We'll just keep the same wall type all the way through, pick this point here, and we'll just work our way around corner to corner until we get back to where we started from. All right, so we can't see the wall structure yet. So let's go ahead and change our detail level to fine. Now we can see all the individual layers within that wall the way that we should. And we're ready to start with the interior of this house. So we do have two different wall types we're going to use for interior walls. Remember that the interior walls are only going to be the stud layer in the middle and then gypsum board on the outside, but we do have two different sizes. We have a 2x6 wall that we're going to use in certain spots, but the majority of them are going to be those 2x4 walls. We already created the 2x4 walls type, so we don't have to create that, but we don't have a 2x6 wall type yet. So we're going to go ahead and make a duplicate of that 2x4 wall, call it 2x6, and then we're going to go in and resize that core boundary from 3.5 to 5.5. So on the Architecture tab, start the Wall tool. Select our 2x4 interior, this one right here that we created previously. Click on Edit Type, and then first thing we're going to do, duplicate. We've got to make a copy of that 2x4, and we'll just back up and call it 2x6 interior. Okay, then we just change the thickness in the structure from 3.5 to 5.5 inches. Say OK. OK. All right, now we're ready to start creating those walls inside. I already have the 2x6 interior wall selected, so I'm going to go ahead and create that first. And I'm going to start right here, and I'm just going to run it down. See, I have to flip it, so space bar to flip it, remember. Make sure that we're covering that wall exactly right where it is on the CAD file. Bring it down, and we'll end right here. And now we've got our first interior wall created. Right, there are a couple more 2x6 walls here and there, so let's go ahead and create those now too. Again, we're tracing the lines on one side or the other of the CAD file. It really doesn't matter which side you use as long as both sides of the wall line up. There is one more section right here, space bar, and I'm just going to run it down to right here. Now I think I have all my 2x6 walls covered, so I can now switch my wall type to the 2x4 and finish by tracing the rest of these walls. And this appears like I clicked on the wrong spot, so there we go. So I'm going to let everybody handle this part on their own, but one thing I want to emphasize, this is really, really important, guys, and that is we don't stop at doorways. Okay, so we're going to pass right through the doorway with our walls. And the reason for that is the door needs a wall to be hosted in. When we go to put the doors in, if we have nothing but a gap there, you won't be able to place the door. Okay, so what I mean by that is when we create the wall, we're going to click here. We're going to run it all the way through the door down to the end of the wall. Okay, same thing here, all the way down to the end of the wall. So we're basically just creating a bunch of walls without doorways yet. Okay, get in here, make sure that this goes all the way across to here and so forth. So I'm going to let you guys take over from here, but just remember, pass those walls all the way through the doorways. Okay, so when you're all done placing the walls, this is basically what you should see. You're going to see all of the walls interconnecting. They're all going to be joined at the intersections, and you're going to have passed through all the doorways. So obviously the next step is going to be placing the doors and the windows. So for the interior doors, go ahead and start the door tool. We're going to be using the single flush type for the interior doors. And most of the doors I think you'll find are going to be 30 inches wide by 80 inches tall. So we're going to go ahead and start with that one. And we can always change the type if it doesn't fit. And I can see already this one does not fit. So we'll go ahead and place that door, and then we'll just change its type. And I'm guessing this then would be 36. And that looks about right. You might have to use the align tool to get the edge of that door exactly where you want it. But fortunately, Revit can detect lines in AutoCAD just like it does in Revit. So I'll go ahead and pause here again and place all the doors. You do the same, and we'll resume on the other side. Okay, I've got all my interior doors in. You'll notice that I did not try to hunt down a bifold door either here or in any of the locations. I had one indicated on the CAD plan, and that's fine. Just put in a standard swing door. Make sure that it swings out on these closets. And then we're going to be ready to put in the exterior doors, of which there are 4. There are 2 going into and out of the garage, 1 at the back of the house, and 1 at the front of the house. We don't have a good exterior door type, so we are going to load a new one now. Go ahead and go to the Insert tab, and we're going to click on Load Autodesk Family. Not Load Family, but Load Autodesk Family. That's going to take us to the online library. And then let's make sure that we select the doors category over here on the left, and then select residential. That'll just kind of filter it down to just a few door types. You can tell it's not a very big library. We don't have a lot of choices here, so we're just going to go ahead and pick one of these 2. You can pick it whichever one you like. I'm going to go ahead and use this square one and say load. So here we get to select the sizes that we want. And so I'm just going to grab everything from 36 by 80 up. So now I'll go back to my door tool. You can see that I have my 4 door types or sizes that I brought in. I'm going to select the 36 by 80. And I'm going to place that at all 4 of my exterior door locations. Make sure you get the door swing to match. So the last piece for the shell of the house is to put in the windows, and you can see there are just a few of those. They're all casement type windows. You can put in whatever type window you want. We'll just use the window tool here. And right down here you can see that there are the casement, different sizes of casement windows. You can just kind of pick whatever you'd like there and then place them into the exterior wall where you think that they're supposed to go. Over the sink in the kitchen, I am going to change the style to a double hung. And this one I'm just going to use, none of these sizes are very good. We could load different sizes or create other sizes, but for now I'm just going to put in this 28 by 46 just for the sake of time. And we'll center that right over the window, or right over the sink rather. All right. We haven't looked at this thing in 3D yet, so let's go ahead and see what we've got. Make sure that things are looking the way that they're supposed to. There's our house that we just created. We traced it over the top of the 2-dimensional CAD file down there. We can still see that. Okay. And it looks like it came together pretty nicely. It looks like it's working okay. It does look like the height of this wall is kind of running into these windows a little bit. So possibly these windows just came in a little bit high. That's one thing that we can pretty easily fix. So let's go ahead and select all 3 of these windows. And we're just going to set their head height to 6'8". 6 space 8. Enter. That'll bring them down to a height that's more appropriate for residential. Okay, so we're done with the upper portion of the house. We're going to go ahead and create the foundation and the footings next, and that'll be the end of part 1 of this demo. So let's go ahead and jump into that next. For that, we're going to go to the basement floor plan. Is probably the best way to draw this thing, or best place to draw it. And we're going to go to the architecture tab, and we're going to go to the wall tool. So typically in residential construction, our foundation walls are going to be concrete and they're going to be 8 inches thick. We don't have a foundation wall that's 8 inches thick. We only have this 10-inch one. So we know how to create an 8-inch thick one though. So we'll select that 10-inch. We'll use that sort of as our template. Click on Edit Type, Duplicate. Make sure that we change that name from 10 to 8, like that. And then let's make sure we change the structure also to 8 inches. And say OK. So as always, before we start placing the walls, we want to look at all of our settings, make sure that we're doing this the right way the first time so we don't have to go back and fix it. The location line is set to, right now, set to finish face exterior. Let's change that. We always want to set it to core face, and we'll say core face exterior. And then let's look at the height of that wall. Base constraint is running from the top of the footing, which is exactly what we want. But the top constraint is not set correctly. It's going only up to the level basement. So that foundation wall would only be 4 inches tall if we left it this way. Let's go ahead and change that to top of foundation, which is where the top of the foundation ought to go, right? And I think we're all set now. So now we can trace all of these lines. Remember, this line is set to the right side of the foundation wall, okay, as we're looking at it. So let's go ahead and just start here. And we'll come down and we'll hit this point, and we'll come down here, hit this point, hit this point, and then we'll come back up right to here. And so that's the main part of our house. That is the part of our house that is 8 feet deep, fully excavated. Under the garage, we're only going to use a frost footing. So we're going to use a 4-foot tall foundation wall instead of an 8-foot tall one. So for this, we are going to have to create one more level. Let's go back to our south elevation view. And let's just make a copy of this top of foundation, and we'll just bring it down 4 feet. So I'm going to say copy, click my first point here, and then move it down 4 feet, or we can just type 4 and hit enter. Now it defaulted to the word level 8. Let's go ahead and change that and we'll call it top of footing garage. So that's going to be the base of our foundation under the garage, and then the top, of course, will be even with the rest of the house. So we'll go back to the basement level. Seems like the best place to create this. And then we're going to go to the wall tool. Still set to the foundation 8-inch concrete, but we just need to change the parameters now. So the top constraint we're going to leave alone. The base constraint we're going to change to top of footing garage. And it looks like I need to top constraint will be top of foundation. Okay, I guess I did have to change that. All right, I think we're ready now, so we'll just kind of trace these last 3 walls. And we should be all set. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like in 3D. Exactly how it should. Okay, so we got this portion only 4 feet deep, this portion 8 feet deep. The last step then is to place the footings onto the foundation. This is the easiest part of everything we were going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and set that up now. We're going to go for this thing now, we're going to go to the structure tab. We don't spend a lot of time on the structure tab. And we're going to go to the wall footing tool right here. Now we got to create a wall footing that is appropriately sized. This one is way too big for most applications for residential. So we will use that as our template. We'll click Edit Type, Duplicate, and let's call this 18 by 8. Something like that. Now we have to change it to 18 by 8, right? The parameters here, 18 inches wide, foundation thickness 8 inches thick. Okay, so just like that. Say OK. And then to place the footing, you simply pick the foundation wall that you want the footing attached to, which is what I'm doing now. Putting the footing on the base of those walls. You will need to rotate around to get to the back side. Let's get underneath this thing. Make sure we're getting all of the walls. Looks like we got, yep, looks like we got all of them now. Okay, that's going to wrap up the part 1. Go ahead and save this. Take your screenshots and make sure you save the Revit file, and we'll resume with this same Revit file for part 2.